Okay, look, I need to tell someone this story. I mean, really tell them. Because literally everyone in my life, or what's left of it, seems to think I'm the villain here. And honestly, I'm so tired of being painted as some kind of monster. Some cold, selfish witch who threw away a perfectly good man. All I did was be honest about who I am. My name is Alara, I'm 25, and my entire world just imploded. Apparently, being authentic makes you a terrible person, according to everyone who thinks they know my business, but they don't. They only know the story Kaylin wanted them to hear. So, I'm telling you, everything. Because I have to believe there's someone out there who won't judge me. Someone who will just listen. Kaylin and I met in college. It's almost a cliche, isn't it? I was a freshman, all nervous energy and ambition, on the track team. He was a sophomore, a gym rat, who moved with this easy confidence that I found both infuriating and completely magnetic. He thought he was hot stuff. And the worst part is, he kind of was. The chemistry, in the beginning, was insane. I'll give him that. Everyone loves to remind me of that now, like it's some kind of Exhibit A in the case against me. But you two couldn't keep your hands off each other. My friend Maya said a few weeks ago, her voice dripping with disappointment. And she was right. We couldn't. It was all frantic energy and stolen moments in the library stacks, and long nights where talking bled into touching, and we never seemed to get enough of either. It was the kind of passion that feels like it's going to last forever when you're 19. But here's the thing nobody wants to acknowledge. People change. I changed. Hell, he changed. We both did. But somehow, when I evolve as a person, it's a betrayal of everything we built. When he changes, getting more serious about his finance career, spending less time being spontaneous, it's called growth, maturity. The double standard is unreal. But whatever, I'm getting used to it. We got engaged about a year ago. It was on our anniversary, at this little Italian restaurant we went to on our first real date. Everyone thought it was so perfect, so romantic. And it was, at the time. I remember crying, happy tears, as he slipped the ring on my finger. I truly believed he was my forever. But somewhere along the way, I don't know, a quiet dissatisfaction started to creep in. It wasn't one big thing. It was a million tiny moments. It was the slow, dawning realization that maybe the person I was in college wasn't actually who I am, deep down. Maybe I was performing a version of myself that I thought I was supposed to be. The passionate, always-on girlfriend. You know the one. Try explaining that to someone who's convinced you're just making excuses. The problem, the real, tangible problem, started when Kaylin became completely obsessed with our physical relationship, or, as he called it, the lack thereof. It became a routine. Every few weeks, he'd corner me. It always felt like being cornered. He'd wait until I was tired or distracted, and then he'd launch into it. His voice would get low and serious. "Alara, we need to talk." And my stomach would just sink. "We're not connecting anymore," he'd say, his eyes intense. "I feel rejected. It feels like our entire relationship is falling apart." Honestly, it felt like being put on trial for not being horny enough. Like my entire worth as a partner, as his fiancé, was measured by how often I wanted to jump his bones. It was exhausting. I tried to explain. God, I tried. "Kaylin, I show my love in different ways now," I'd say, my voice pleading. "I planned that whole weekend trip for your birthday. I stay up late listening, when you're stressed about work. Can't we find new ways to connect that aren't just physical?" He'd just look at me like I was speaking a foreign language. His brow would furrow and he'd shake his head slowly. "That's different, Alara. That's friend stuff. I'm talking about intimacy. About passion." Then he'd start bringing up college. It was his favorite weapon. "Remember how we used to be? Remember that time in the dorms? You were so passionate." It felt like those early days were some kind of contract I'd signed in invisible ink, a contract that said I would forever be that 19-year-old girl, and now I was in violation. He couldn't accept that the person I was at 19 might be different from who I am at 25. What really got under my skin, though, was how he'd monitor everything. If I wanted a night out with my friends, it was a whole interrogation. Who's going? Where are you going? What time will you be back? But if he went out with his buddies, it was just blowing off steam. If I was tired after a long day at my graphic design job, he'd take it personally. If I said I just wanted to curl up and watch a movie instead of, it became this huge statement about the state of our entire union. I couldn't just be a human being having a human day. Everything I did, every mood I had, was filtered through the lens of his needs. It was suffocating. But when I'd ask him about his day, or show interest in his life, suddenly I was being clingy. If I questioned a mood he was in, I was being controlling. The hypocrisy was mind-blowing. But pointing it out just made me the bad guy keeping score. I started keeping a mental list of all the ways I did try to connect with him, just to defend myself in my own head. I planned nice dinners. I bought him that expensive watch he wanted. I tried to be supportive when he was stressed about a big project at his firm. But somehow, none of that registered as love in his eyes. It was like he had this very specific, very narrow definition of what a good girlfriend looked like, and anything outside of that box was meaningless. The conversations became these draining circular arguments where he'd analyze every feeling I had. Sometimes I'd just end up crying from the sheer overwhelming frustration of it all. And then he'd soften his voice and act like my tears were some kind of manipulation, instead of a genuine reaction to how impossible he was making everything feel. He had this line he'd use, and it drove me insane. He'd sigh, run a hand through his perfectly styled hair, and say, "I just want us to be like we used to be." And one night, I finally snapped back, my voice trembling. "I'm not who I used to be, Kaylin. And neither are you. Why is that so hard to accept?" He just looked at me, his face blank. He didn't have an answer. He just wanted what he wanted. And he was slowly, painfully, making me realize that I wasn't the person who could give it to him anymore. The nights became the hardest. Kaylin would be asleep next to me, breathing deeply, and I'd be wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. What was wrong with me? Was I broken? Was I falling out of love? I still loved him, the person he was, the history we had, but the physical side, it felt like a chore, a performance, and the guilt was eating me alive. So, I did what our generation does. I turned to my phone. In the blue glow of the screen, I typed my secret fears into the search bar. Low libido in long-term relationship. Why don't I want sex with my fiancé? Am I broken if I don't want to be intimate? The results were a mess of medical articles about hormones, lifestyle blogs about spicing things up, and relationship advice columns that mostly made me feel worse. They all seemed to assume that a lack of physical desire was a problem that needed to be fixed. Buy lingerie, they said. Plan a sexy getaway. It all felt so performative. It wasn't about a lack of effort. It was a lack of a fundamental want. I spent weeks falling down these digital rabbit holes, feeling more lost with every click. I felt like a failure, a defective model of a girlfriend. Then one night, scrolling through a forum, I don't even remember which one, I saw a word I'd heard before but never really thought about: asexuality. I'd always thought it was simple, that it just meant you didn't have sex. Full stop. But someone on the forum was explaining that it was a spectrum. They wrote, "It's not about your body's ability to function, it's about attraction. It's about not experiencing sexual attraction to other people, or experiencing it very rarely, or only under specific circumstances." My fingers paused over the screen. It's about attraction. I opened a new tab and typed in the word. I started reading. I read about the asexual spectrum, or the ace spectrum. I read about demisexuality, where attraction only forms after a deep emotional bond. I read about gray sexuality, where attraction is rare and fleeting. And then I read the basic definition of asexuality: a lack of sexual attraction to others. It wasn't about a lack of romantic love. It wasn't about a lack of libido or physical response. It was purely about that innate magnetic pull towards a person in that way. Suddenly, 1,000 little pieces of my life started clicking into place. I'd always enjoyed the romantic parts of relationships far more than the physical parts. I loved the hand-holding, the deep conversations, the feeling of partnership. With Kaylan in the beginning, the passion was new and exciting, tied up in the thrill of a new romance. But as the relationship settled, that specific desire had just faded. Not my love for him, not my romantic feelings, but the attraction in that one specific way. I kept reading, my heart pounding in my chest. I read stories from other people who identified as ace. Women who loved their partners deeply, but felt immense pressure and guilt over the physical side of their relationship. People who felt broken for years until they found this community, this language. A sentence from one article burned itself into my brain. "You are not broken, you do not need to be fixed." Tears started streaming down my face, not tears of sadness or frustration, but tears of pure, unadulterated relief. It was like 100-pound weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like there was something fundamentally wrong with me. There was a word for it. There were other people like me. I wasn't a defective girlfriend. I wasn't a cold-hearted monster. Maybe I was just asexual, or somewhere on that spectrum. The thought was terrifying, but it was also liberating. It wasn't an excuse. It was an explanation. It was a piece of my own identity that had been hiding in plain sight. I closed the laptop and took a deep, shuddering breath, the first real, full breath I felt like I'd taken in a year. The room was quiet, except for Kaylan's soft breathing beside me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Real hope. Maybe if I could explain this to him, he would understand. Maybe if he knew it wasn't about him, but about me, about how I'm wired, he could finally stop seeing it as a personal rejection. Maybe we could find a new way forward, together. I had to tell him. It was the most honest, most vulnerable part of myself I had ever uncovered, and I wanted to share it with the man I was supposed to marry. I clung to that fragile hope, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Chapter 3: The Confession and the Trial. I decided to wait for the weekend. I wanted us to be relaxed, not stressed from work. I planned to make his favorite dinner steak and roasted potatoes. I thought if I could create a safe, loving environment, he might be more open to listening. The whole time I was cooking, my hands were shaking. This felt bigger than any conversation we'd ever had. It was about laying my entire self bare. We ate dinner, making small talk about our week. It was nice, almost normal. But the whole time, the words were sitting on the tip of my tongue, heavy and electric. Finally, after we'd cleared the plates, we sat on the couch with glasses of wine. This was it. "Kaylan," I started, my voice barely a whisper. I took a breath and tried again. "There's something I need to talk to you about, something I've been figuring out about myself." He put his phone down, giving me his full attention. His expression was cautious. "Okay," he said slowly. "What's up?" I twisted the stem of my wine glass. "You know how we've been struggling with the physical side of things, and how I felt like there's something wrong with me." He nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "Yeah. Well," I said, looking at my hands, "I've been doing a lot of reading, and I think I might be somewhere on the asexual spectrum." I finally looked up at him. The silence that followed was deafening. He just stared at me, his face a complete blank. Then, a slow, disbelieving frown formed on his lips. "Asexual?" he repeated, the word sounding foreign and absurd coming from his mouth. "What does that even mean? You're not a plant, Alara." "No, it's not that," I rushed to explain, my heart sinking. "It just means I don't really experience sexual attraction, or I experience it very, very rarely. It's not about you, it's about how my brain is wired. I still love you, romantically, so much." I thought I was being vulnerable. I thought I was sharing a profound, personal truth. But the look on his face, it was like I had just confessed to cheating on him. It was a look of personal betrayal. Are you sure? He asked, his voice suddenly sharp, like a lawyer cross-examining a hostile witness. I think so. A lot of it really resonates with me. How long have you been thinking about this? He demanded. Why haven't you ever mentioned this before? Because I didn't have the words for it before. I just thought I was broken. Or maybe, he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping, this is just a convenient excuse to avoid dealing with our problems. That hit me like a slap in the face. An excuse. He thought my identity, this thing that had brought me so much clarity and relief, was a strategic lie. It just went downhill from there. He poked holes in everything I said. He brought up our past again, wielding it like a club. But what about in college? You weren't asexual then. I tried to explain that sexuality can be fluid, that people can change and discover things about themselves later in life, but he wasn't listening. He was only interested in invalidating my experience because it was inconvenient for him. And then he had the absolute, unmitigated nerve to say it. He sat back, crossing his arms, and a strange, cold look came over his face. Okay, he said, as if considering a business proposal. Let's say you're right. Let's say you really are asexual. Then maybe we should open up our relationship so I can get my needs met elsewhere. I couldn't breathe. The air was punched out of my lungs. I was sharing the most vulnerable part of my soul, and his first thought wasn't, how can I support you? Or, what does this mean for us? It was, how can I work around this inconvenience to get laid? It felt so selfish, so unbelievably hurtful. Tears started streaming down my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. The whole conversation, his reaction, it was all too much. This isn't about you, Kaylin, I sobbed. This is about me. This is about who I am. His reaction to my tears was even worse. He saw it as proof. See, you get emotional and you can't have a real conversation about this. He got up and started pacing the living room, agitated. He was running his hands through his hair, looking for something, anything, to win the argument. And then he stopped. He had walked past the open door to our bedroom. His eyes narrowed. He walked into the bedroom and came back out holding my vibrator, which I kept in my nightstand drawer. He held it up like it was a smoking gun. And what is this, Alara? He said, his voice dripping with triumphant accusation. If you're so asexual, then what the hell is this? I just stared at him, horrified. He had gone through my personal belongings to find a weapon. That's my personal business, I stammered, feeling violated and ashamed. Asexuality is about attraction to other people, Kaylin. It's not about whether a person has a libido or physical needs. But he wasn't interested in nuance or education. He didn't want to learn. He just wanted to be right. He saw it as a massive contradiction, the ultimate gotcha moment that proved I was lying about everything. The fight ended there, because there was nothing left to say. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. I looked back at him and saw a stranger. The man I thought I knew, the man I loved, would never have been so cruel. He slept on the couch that night. And as I lay in our bed alone, I realized the hope I had felt was gone. In its place was a cold, terrifying certainty. This was the beginning of the end. Chapter 4. The Collapse. After that night, our apartment became a war zone. A cold war fought with silence and loaded glances. The vibrator became his trump card. Anytime I tried to talk about needing space or figuring myself out, he'd shut it down. Oh, I'm sure you need to figure things out, he'd say with a sarcastic smirk, and I knew exactly what he was referencing. It was his go-to weapon, and it was devastatingly effective. The pressure became incredible. He started watching me like a hawk, analyzing my every reaction. If I seemed tired after work, it was because I was avoiding him. If I wanted to read a book instead of talking, it was because I was shutting him out. There was no room for me to just be without it meaning something terrible about our relationship. I felt like I was under a microscope, 24 hours a day. He started pushing for couples counseling. I knew, in my gut, that he didn't want a neutral mediator. He wanted a professional, an authority figure, to sit me down and tell me I was wrong. He wanted someone to fix me. His moods became a terrifying roller coaster. One day he'd be angry and accusatory. The next, he'd be sad and hurt, talking about how much he missed us, the old us. Then he'd switch to being understanding, trying to coax me into talking, only to get angry again when my answers weren't what he wanted to hear. It was emotional whiplash, and it was exhausting trying to keep up. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. The manipulation ramped up. He'd withdraw all affection as punishment, giving me the silent treatment for days. Then, when I'd finally give him the space he seemed to be demanding, he'd accuse me of being the one creating distance. "Why are you rejecting me?" he'd ask, his voice wounded, and I'd feel like I was losing my mind. He started talking about our future like it was a settled deal, like my current crisis was just a temporary, annoying obstacle to his grand life plan. He'd mentioned buying a house in the suburbs or what names he liked for kids. It felt less like a partnership and more like he was claiming ownership over my future, a future I was no longer sure I wanted with him. He was waiting for me to snap out of it, to come to my senses and go back to being the girl he got engaged to. He never once accepted my explanation about being on the ACE spectrum. To him, it was just a phase, a problem to be solved. And so, without even realizing it at first, I started to emotionally check out. It was a defense mechanism. It became easier to just go through the motions, to nod and agree, than to keep fighting the same losing battle over and over again. I'd let his accusations wash over me. I'd retreat into my own head, where I was safe. Of course, my withdrawal just gave him more ammunition. "See," he'd say, his voice filled with frustration. "You're not even trying anymore, Alara. You've given up on us." The irony was crushing. He had created an environment where it was impossible for me to be myself, and then he blamed me for withdrawing from it. Finally, after months of this agonizing back and forth, he hit his breaking point. I came home from work one Tuesday, and he was sitting on the couch with a box next to him, filled with some of his things. I knew instantly. The conversation was strangely anticlimactic after all the high drama. There was no shouting, no crying. His voice was calm, detached. "I can't do this anymore," he said, not looking at me. "I can't marry someone who doesn't want the same things I want from a relationship. I need to be with someone who is certain they want to be with me." What got me was how he framed it. He sounded so mature, so reasonable, like he was this evolved person setting healthy boundaries, instead of a man who'd spent the last 6 months trying to emotionally bludgeon me into being someone I'm not. He kept saying things like, "We just want different things," and "It's better to end this now, before we make a huge mistake." Like he hadn't already been hurting me for months with his criticism and his pressure. He slid the engagement ring across the coffee table towards me. "I think you should keep this," he said, a gesture that felt more like a final, pitying dismissal than kindness. Part of me was devastated. 4 years of my life, a future I had planned, all gone. But a much, much larger part of me was relieved. The pressure was finally off. The microscope was gone. I didn't have to defend my every thought and feeling anymore. I was hurt by how easily he could walk away, but I was also grateful that he was the one to finally pull the plug. Because I don't know if I would have had the strength to do it myself. He left that night, and as the door clicked shut behind him, the silence in the apartment was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The silence didn't last long. Within days, the whispers started. Kaylin, it turned out, was very good at controlling a narrative. I started getting texts from our mutual friends. Tentative, awkward texts. "Hey, heard about you and Kaylin, so sorry. Are you okay?" But beneath the sympathy, I could feel the questions. I could feel the judgment. He had gotten to them first. He had told them his version. And his version was simple, compelling, and made him look like a tragic hero. In his story, I had suddenly, inexplicably changed. I had become cold and distant. I refused to work on our relationship. He, on the other hand, had tried everything to save us, but you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. I was cast as the selfish villain who had wasted 4 years of his life. I was the cautionary tale. People who had never been in a long-term relationship were suddenly experts, giving me unsolicited advice. Maybe you should have communicated better, one friend suggested, as if I hadn't spent months trying to explain my deepest feelings to a brick wall. What was so frustrating was how normal his desires seemed to everyone else. He wanted more physical connection. That's seen as the default, the healthy standard. Therefore, because I wanted less, I was the one with the problem. My needs, my identity, were automatically labeled as the issue. About 2 months after he moved out, I was doom scrolling through Instagram late one night. And then I saw it, a picture Kalen had posted. He was at the gym, smiling broadly, his arm wrapped around a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful, with a bright smile and ridiculously toned arms. The caption read, "Sundays are for couples who lift together." Her name was Brielle. It wasn't just a casual thing. Over the next few weeks, my feed was inundated with them. Workout videos together, cute couple selfies after a run, romantic dinner dates. All this lovey-dovey stuff, broadcast for the world to see, making it obvious that they had exactly the kind of performative, passionate connection he'd been demanding from me. Seeing them together was like getting punched in the stomach. Not because I wanted him back. I really, truly didn't. It was because it felt like the final, public validation of his story. Here he was, happy and glowing with someone who was clearly everything I wasn't. And there I was, still single, still figuring things out. Our mutual friends loved it. Their comments flooded his posts. "So happy for you, man. You look so good together. She's perfect for you." The subtext was deafeningly clear. I hadn't appreciated him, and now he was with someone who did. Then, about 8 months after our breakup, the final blow came. Another Instagram post. It was a picture of Brielle's hand, a massive diamond ring on her finger, held up against Kalen's smiling face. The caption, "She said yes. Can't wait to spend forever with my soulmate." 8 months. We had been together for 4 years. He proposed to someone he had known for less than a year. The news hit me hard. It made everything we'd had feel like a lie. Was I just a placeholder? Was he just going through a checklist for his life, plan, college, job, fiancé, marriage, and I was just the first candidate who failed the final interview? I felt small and foolish. The world had made its decision. Kalen was the good guy who had found his happiness. And I was the bitter ex who had made a huge mistake. That was the story. And for a little while, in my darkest moments, I almost started to believe it myself. Life moved on. I threw myself into my work, started seeing a therapist, and slowly began rebuilding my social life with friends who hadn't been part of my life with Kalen. I was starting to feel okay. Not great, but okay. The sting of the engagement announcement was fading into a dull ache. Then, one Thursday evening, I got a notification on my phone, a message request on Instagram. The name was Brielle. My heart hammered against my ribs. My first thought was that she was going to attack me, tell me to stop lurking, to leave them alone. My finger hovered over the delete button. But curiosity, or maybe some other instinct, got the better of me. I opened it. The message was long, and it wasn't what I expected at all. "Hi, Alara," it began. "This is probably really weird, and I'm so sorry to bother you. My name is Brielle. I'm Kalen's fiancé. Please don't think I'm trying to start drama. But I needed to talk to you. Kalen has told me his version of why you two broke up, but some things just aren't adding up for me." I read the words over and over, my mind reeling. She went on to explain that she'd been doing some detective work. She'd seen old photos of us on mutual friends' pages where I looked happy and in love. Right up until the end. It didn't match his narrative about me being a cold, checked out girlfriend for months. What really got her attention, she wrote, was when she found out about my exploration of asexuality. Kaylin had brushed it off to her as me making up an excuse, but when she researched it herself, she realized it was a legitimate orientation. She started wondering what else he might have misrepresented. We messaged back and forth for a bit, and then she asked if we could talk on the phone. The conversation we had was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Here was this woman who was living my old life, asking me to verify whether her fiancé was a liar. She wanted to know if he'd really been as patient and understanding as he claimed. He told me he spent months trying to support you through a phase, she said, her voice hesitant. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Support me? Brielle, he cross-examined me. He went through my nightstand to find things to use against me. He made me feel like I was fundamentally broken. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Slowly, she started to open up. She told me she was seeing some of the same behaviors. He'd get intensely jealous if she even mentioned a male friend from work. He monitored her social media and would get upset if she didn't post about them enough. He was starting to question her past relationships, making her feel like she constantly had to prove her loyalty. The same patterns, the same playbook. But the most shocking revelation was about their physical relationship, the one that had looked so perfect online. Honestly, she confessed, her voice dropping to a whisper, it's a lot. The passion you see online is mostly just him. I feel this constant pressure to be this super enthusiastic, always in the mood girlfriend he said he was missing with you. But privately, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. It's like his need for validation in that department is a bottomless pit. The validation I felt in that moment was so powerful it almost made me dizzy. It was never about me. It was about his insatiable need. The conversation came to a head when she asked the question I could see coming from a mile away. Alara, she said, her voice trembling slightly, be honest with me. Am I making a mistake by marrying him? I took a deep breath. I could have been cruel. I could have said yes and enjoyed the revenge. But looking back, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about her, another woman caught in his web of control. So, I told her the truth. Everything. The pressure, the dismissal of my identity, the way he made me feel small and wrong for just being me. I told her about the profound relief I felt when it was finally over. We were on the phone for over an hour. When we hung up, I felt strangely light. The story wasn't just mine anymore. Someone else knew. Someone else understood. A few weeks after our call, I heard through the grapevine that the engagement was off. Brielle told me later that after our conversation, she had told Kaylin she wanted to slow things down, maybe do some premarital counseling. His reaction was apparently explosive. He accused her of letting me poison her mind against him. He said she was being manipulated by a bitter, jealous ex who was trying to sabotage their happiness. And that's when she really saw it. The pattern. Anytime someone questioned his behavior or asked him to take accountability, he turned it around. He made them the bad guy. He was constitutionally incapable of handling criticism, of admitting that he might be part of the problem. She broke it off for good about a month after that. And just as he did with me, he immediately started telling people his version. That Brielle had suddenly changed, that she'd been influenced by negative people. Sound familiar? Once again, his partner was the problem, and he was the innocent victim. But this time, it didn't stick. Word gets around when someone has 2 failed engagements in less than a year. People started putting the pieces together, comparing stories. The narrative finally shifted. It went from poor Kaylin to maybe Kaylin is the common denominator. His reputation took a hit. The most unexpected thing came out of all this mess. Brielle and I actually became friends. It was weird at first, but we bonded over the shared, bizarre experience of being manipulated by the same person. She helped me see that my instincts had been right all along. And I hope I helped her see that she had dodged a bullet. It was a weird, but deeply healing connection. As for me, well, I'm still figuring things out. But now, I'm doing it in peace. I've learned that I am, in fact, somewhere on the asexual spectrum. And that's not a problem or a flaw. It's just a part of who I am. It's perfectly valid. My therapist has been amazing. She helped me unpack so much of the guilt and shame Kaylin had piled on top of me. I've learned that the right partner, if and when I find one, will accept and support my journey. They won't try to change me to fit their needs. I'm single. And honestly, I'm happier than I have been in years. I have my own space, my own life. I've reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my years in the Kalen bubble. I've taken up painting again, a hobby he had subtly discouraged because it was messy. My life doesn't revolve around managing someone else's emotions anymore. The best part is, I don't feel like I'm performing. I don't have to constantly prove my worth or justify my feelings or apologize for being who I am. I can just exist, as myself, and that is more than enough. So yeah, that's my story. Kaylin begged for a certain kind of intimacy for months. I shut it down because it wasn't who I was. And now he's gone for good. And despite what everyone thought would happen, I'm the one who ended up better off. Sometimes the trash really does take itself out. I know people expected me to regret losing him. They expected me to realize I'd made a mistake, to learn some hard lesson about appreciating what I had. But the only thing I regret is not trusting my instincts sooner. The only mistake I made was trying to be someone I wasn't for so long. And the only lesson I learned is that I would rather be alone and authentic than partnered and performing. That might not be the ending people wanted for this story, but it's the ending I needed. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I'm completely okay with disappointing people's expectations if it means being true to myself. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to live with my choices. And I choose authenticity over approval, every single time.